Welcome to Debt Free in IT. I'm your host, Mike. This podcast is for anyone who's looking to get into the IT industry, whether it's for a career change or you're just interested. I think you come to the right place. In today's episode, it's all about why no one wants to be a network engineer. So I'm sure you've probably seen on the internet, heard from a coworker, or maybe you're trying to get into the networking field and you've been told that networking is dead, networking is going away. AI is going to replace network engineers. So today, we're going to discuss why you may be hearing that networking is dead, also some of the cons of being in networking, some misconceptions of networking, and how I think this is going to create a great opportunity for all networking professionals. So first, let's look at some of the cons of being in networking. So first off the bat, networking ain't really as hyped up as cybersecurity or the cloud. So a lot of times the cloud is some of the newer technologies that's been around for a couple of years. You hear about that more. You also hear about cybersecurity more than networking. Any kind of advertisement, if it's for tech, usually it's going to be one of those two. Then also, when looking at those two roles, so cybersecurity and cloud roles, a lot of times they end up being fully remote. So even though a lot of places is going back in office, you still can do some hunting around and possibly land a cybersecurity role where you may be fully remote. So in networking, you're 9 times out of 10, you may not be fully remote. So, because usually with networking, like I said, you got the infrastructure to look after. You're supporting the infrastructure. So if some of that equipment goes down, someone has to be on site in order to replace that equipment and get everything back up and running. With that being said, in networking, sometimes you may see where the lower position may not be totally remote, where usually they may have to come in. Let's say that technician, they may be the one that's doing the racking and stacking. So usually they may not be fully remote. They may have maybe 1 or 2 days remote. And then some places, as you go up the ladder, you go up the networking hierarchy, you move up to that analyst, that engineer. Usually they may have a couple more days remote other than being in the office. But for the most part, there's still plenty of places out here that everyone on the networking team is in office every day, because from that networking aspect, that's your whole infrastructure. Without the network, if the network ain't running right, ain't nothing else running correctly. So network engineers, networking technicians, networking admins, a lot of times it's hard to find some of these roles that's fully remote. There are some out there here and there. There are very, very few of them. But like I said, it's hard to find some of those roles that's fully remote, where in cybersecurity, you're able, if you're on the information side of the house for security, you're able to be anywhere and pretty much be able to work for a company. Your home base may be in a whole other state. And that's very possible with cybersecurity and also with some cloud roles. So you're able to find more remote roles for those positions than networking, which I think draws more people in, because like I said, who wouldn't want to work at home and don't have to make a long commute? So that's one of the first cons to being in networking, is that cybersecurity in the cloud, like I said, is much more advertised more. And then you're still able to find some totally fully remote roles in those positions right now. So the second con to being in networking is that networking is very hands-on. So in networking, you will be configuring physical pieces of equipment, then racking and stacking that equipment. So for some folks, they may not want to be that hands-on. So they may opt for a position that may not have as much equipment as networking. Because you think about it, in networking, every one of your closets, you have your data center. Every organization, if your organization consists of multiple buildings, you got to think all of those buildings have networking closets, and all of those buildings going to have your pieces of equipment in it. So it is, if you look at it piece by piece, it's a lot of pieces, a lot of equipment to be able to manage. So, which means that equipment don't stay up and running forever. So if you're in a large environment, it could come to the point where you may have something that goes down quite often. Not saying every day, because most of the time these switches and devices, they're built to run for years. But you do have some use cases where some may end up causing issues. It may be an iOS issue that makes the device go down, or it could be a stat ring broken that makes the device reboot. But in this role, in this field, networking, like I said, it's very hands-on. Some people may not like that. So, and then when you flip it to the other side of just going down the path of learning networking. I think that turns some people off because with networking, it is a whole bunch of information at once. So someone coming into it may get overwhelmed with it quick and opt to just go to a different position or just try to learn something different. So they may go to cybersecurity, but in the real world, you understand that, okay, you can't be good at cybersecurity without being good at networking. So it goes hand in hand. But I think just the presentation of networking, all the information that's presented when trying to learn networking, and then when you take that to the job, just being very hands-on, movement every day, which for me, it made the day go by faster because you never knew what each day may bring. So some days you may be on the go a lot. Some days you may not be on the go a lot. But to me, I liked it because it switched things up for me where every day wasn't the same. So that's what you get with networking. It's hard to predict your day, where if you're doing another position, let's say a server admin where most of your devices is virtual or most of your servers is virtual, then if you're having issues, you still can handle that from your home, from the comfort of your home, or if you're in office for a couple of days, you're at your computer handling it, long as it's not a hardware issue somewhere. Most of the time, if it's a server issue, 9 times out of 10 in these days, that server is possibly virtual. So you're able to handle it from the comfort of your home, from the comfort of your desk. You don't have to get up and go, where in networking, it's not uncommon to maybe start out at home. If you end up getting a remote role or you got a couple of days remote, you may start out at home, but you may end up at a physical location where, okay, we're having an issue at this location. I'm the closest one on my team, so let me go and look at this issue and see if I can get it resolved. So with networking, there's a lot of moving parts, which I think turns some people off, which is why you may hear people say that networking is dead and that networking ain't a good field to get into. So the last con to being in networking is that networking is high stress, high responsibility. So in networking, it is a little bit more stressful, because like I said, you're supporting the infrastructure. There's more responsibility. Usually in networking, you can't afford to really make mistakes with your configuration. So if you configure something, you can't really afford to just make a whole bunch of mistakes. Now, mistakes will happen because usually that's how you're going to learn from it. You're going to learn from making your mistakes, but you can't just go in there and making all kind of mistakes. So, and a lot of times the organization will have some kind of check ties to it, to where if it's a large configuration change or a big change, you may not be able to just go in and make that change on the fly. Usually you have to go through some kind of change control where you push it up the ladder that, hey, I need to make this change on this devices or these couple devices, push it up the ladder, get it approved by the right personnel, and then it's on the calendar. So when it's on the calendar, everyone in that department, in that IT department, sees that, okay, on this day at this time, you're about to make this change on the network, or you're about to make the change to this certain part of the network, or to this organization, or to this building that's in your network. You're about to make that change, but everyone knows it. That way, everyone can prepare for it ahead of time. So it's not like you're going in off the fly and just, oh, I need to make this change. Let me go ahead and do it. Bam. So a lot of times you're not really doing it like that. There is some check ties to it, but at the same time, like it is a high stress, high responsibility depending on the role that you're in. So there's a lot of monitoring and networking. So you're monitoring the network. And like I said, at any given time, something can go down. Doesn't happen often, but it is possible for something to go down, which then if it's one of your main devices or something that takes down a lot of the infrastructure, then it quickly goes from a regular day to maybe a high stressful day. So like I said, in networking, you do have a lot of, I ain't gonna say a lot of stress because it just depends on the organization, but there is a lot of responsibility because once you get in networking, you got the keys in your hand. So it's almost like you got the keys to the kingdom almost. So where, okay, if you misconfigure something, it's not uncommon to shut down a whole department. It's not uncommon for, because mistakes do happen. And I think that this is one of the things that may draw people away from networking is that it is high stress, high responsibility for most folks where, usually everything that's going on in your organization, 9 times out of 10, you probably got someone from networking involved on that issue. So usually network we're pulled into all the issues. No matter if it's a network issue or not. If it's not a network issue, usually we're there to prove that it's not a network issue. So we got to prove that it's not the network. Most of the time, anything that happens, first thing most people say is, "Oh, it's a network." So a lot of times we may be dragged in on those calls or in those meetings where we just got to prove that, hey, it's not the network. It's something going on over here with this particular device that belongs to this other team. So all of that happens inside of networking. So, which I think that may be my last con to being in networking. So next, let's look at some misconceptions of networking. So these are the things that I think a lot of people have wrong about networking. So one of the first ones that stands out is, like I said, most people may think that network engineers don't make good money. So you can't be more further from the truth. Now, if you look at it, I say on an entry-level basis, if you compare an entry-level networking role to an entry-level cyber role, a lot of times I think that cyber role may end up paying a little bit more. But as that experience evens out, so as that entry-level cyber person, entry-level networking person make their way up the ladder, I think the pay starts to get kind of close to where networking usually gets paid pretty good. Usually I would say you can get 6 figures if that's your mark in networking, as well as cyber, as well as cloud. So all of that is going to depend on your experience. So the term that, okay, network engineers don't make no decent money, it can't be no further from the truth, because there's plenty of positions out there. If you look up network engineer in your town, I guarantee you find something that's at least over 6 figures or even close to it. So I think that, a lot of people just see the cyber, and cyber is one of those fields where I've seen folks with maybe 1 to 3 years experience that can hop into a cyber role and end up making decent income just from the jump. Where usually with networking, you do usually have to work yourself up to where you may start out as that technician, and then depending on your area, pretty much all the pay is going to depend on the area. So if you're in a large city, usually you're going to get paid more anyway than in a smaller town. But usually in networking, before you get to the big money, and I'm saying the big money, most people consider that 6 figures. So before you get to that, usually in networking, you're probably going to have at least probably 3 to 4 years of experience in just networking or more. So, and usually, like I say, on the cyber side, that's probably possible before you hit those years. So, like I said, in overall, I think both of them probably even out to where you can do good in networking, you can do real good in cyber. But that's one of the misconceptions that most people have about being in networking. The next misconception I hear a lot is that most people say that since everything is moving to the cloud, networking isn't needed anymore. So pretty much I say that's not true either, because even though you're in the cloud, you have networking there also. So if you look at it, a lot of these popular cloud vendors, AWS, Azure, Google, all of them have networking certifications within their cloud lineup. So they have a cloud specialty certification for AWS. You have some form of networking certification for Azure. So most of these environments, like I said, you still have that networking aspect. And then when you look at the different organizations, so most of these organizations are not putting everything in the cloud. Most of them, I would probably, if I had to take an educated guess, I would say that most of them is probably running a hybrid model to where they still have some traditional networking infrastructure, and then they have a connection to the cloud where they maybe have some servers or something like that in the cloud also. With that being said, so that network engineer is still needed there, or that network personnel is still needed there to support that network infrastructure. So whether it's traditional networking or whether it's going in the cloud and networking in the cloud. So the networking aspect is still there. I don't really think there is a way to get rid of the networking aspect, because everything runs on the network. So if you think about it, if you're in a server position, you have networking there. In desktop position, you're connecting to the network. Everything pretty much goes back to that network. So that's why I'm a big proponent of pushing, understanding networking. No, even from a basic aspect, I think it helps you out. I'm not saying that everyone has to go out and get a CCNA. but it is a good certification, but everyone don't have to go out and get it. I'm just saying have an understanding of networking. That way, when you're doing other specializations or you're going down your cloud road, you're going down your cybersecurity realm. When you're in cybersecurity, you start hearing terms like TCP, UDP, understanding different port numbers and things like that. You need to, from a networking aspect, that's some of the stuff you learn in networking. So when you get in cyber, it makes it a little bit easier to understand because now you're taking that concept you learned in networking and then you're adding on to it. So one of the misconceptions, most people say that networking, since it's in the cloud, you ain't going to need networking no more. That can't be no further from the truth. And then the third misconception is that AI and automation will make network engineers obsolete. So that can't be no further from the truth either. So I think with AI and automation, it will make networking more efficient, but still there's someone that has to be able to support those two pieces also. So with automation, that's coming along in networking. So, and I'm gonna touch on that a little bit later, but that's coming up in networking where a lot of companies now, they maybe have moved on to their networking environment, maybe utilizing SD-WAN, maybe utilizing some kind of programmability on their network, some kind of automation. So I think with automation and AI, it's not here to replace anything. I don't think it's going to replace no network engineer, but I think it will make that network engineer position evolve to something more, to where, okay, I'm a network engineer, but I need to learn about automation. I need to learn about AI prompting. I need to learn how to make this work for me. So not work against me, pretty much make it work for me. Almost like when you're investing your dollar, you're investing your money into the S&P. You're making your money work for you. You're working smarter, not harder. So the same component with AI and automation is for that networking person, is going to make them work smarter, not harder. So I think that saying that AI and automation will make network engineers obsolete also can't be no further from the truth. Quick pause. I'd like to welcome you to the Log Files. So the Log Files is a weekly newsletter to help you start your IT career with practical advice and tips, powered by yours truly. It's launched at the beginning of the year. It's packed with actionable advice, resources, and insights to help you kickstart your IT journey. So the link is in the description. Also, I have it pinned in the comments. So don't miss out. Now back to the episode. So next, I'd like to look at the opportunity that all of these changes for networking creates and how a networking professional can evolve. So one thing is we all know that networking is involved in everything. So knowing networking makes it easier to pivot to other specializations. And then also with all these changes, if a network professional goes out and pretty much adapt to these changes, instead of just, you don't want to sit there and let the time pass you by, but you want to start adapting to some of these changes. That way you're familiar with automation. You're a little bit familiar with AI. I'm not saying you got to be the best at either one of them, but you're familiar with all of those aspects. You're familiar with the changes that's happening in your environment with networking. So I think by doing this, it's going to make that person stand out, because with this, like I said, you're going to have less competition, and also there's a higher demand for those folks. So with fewer people getting into networking, it's going to create that high demand with less competition. And then as one evolves into some of these networking roles, where, okay, you might have to know a little bit of programming. You might have to know some Python. But the more that you learn to evolve that networking role, I think the more it's going to end up making you stand out. So like I said, one of the opportunities that it creates is in networking, less people getting in, less competition. Then also with the evolving role of a network engineer, we're getting into where we start seeing a higher demand for those folks where, you're looking for somebody with some programmability skills. You're looking for someone that may have a little bit of cloud skills. You're looking for someone that may end up having some network security skills. So I think that's going to end up being the network engineer for the future. I know as I look around on Indeed, a lot of networking roles already, they're looking for somebody with those qualities or someone with those skill sets. You see a lot of, if you look at a network engineer role, you'll see where a lot of times they may ask that you have some Palo Alto experience. They may ask that you have some Fortinet experience. So I think this is going to create the opportunity for that network engineer or that network professional to evolve in this networking realm and kind of start branching out a little bit, advancing their skill set in other areas, but still their main area will be in this networking role. And then, like I touched on earlier, like I said, I think learning these skills will make a network professional evolve in their current role and also stand out to be way more marketable. Because, like I said, as you start looking around, you see different positions that they may be asking for some Python experience, some Ansible experience, some Terraform experience. They also, may want you to know some cloud networking. So, like I said, that would be a good proponent to go to, especially if you're used to traditional networking like myself. So one of my goals this year is, like I said, to start exploring out into the cloud, because I realized that, okay, the cloud is here to stay. It's not no fly by night thing. It's a real thing. So I think that for me, from this aspect, I'm mostly a networking person. I'm mostly traditional networking. So it would be in my best interest to start to venture out and explore some networking within the cloud. I already have the networking proponent, so just learning that cloud aspect and how that goes along inside of that cloud environment. So then getting familiar with some software-defined networking, some SD-WAN, getting a little Python under your belt, getting a little Ansible, a little Terraform. I think all of that will make that network engineer or that network professional evolve and stand out and become more marketable as well as more valuable. So at the end of the day, is networking dead? Not at all, my friend. So that brings me to the end of this episode. Hopefully you found some value in this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, you can follow me at debtfreeinit. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at debtfreeinit@gmail.com. Other than that, I'll see you next week. Peace.